The caller sounded real, the threat sounded real, the address sounded real, and the network dashboard looked nice and green, which of course means everything must be fine, right? Sure. And the check engine light is probably just being dramatic today. Today I want to talk about trust gaps in emergency communications. You know, that uncomfortable space between what something appears to be and what's actually happening. Because a swatting call can sound real, a 911 network can look healthy, and a location record can appear to be correct. And you've got the vendor who says, hey, everything looks normal from our side. One of my favorite phrases in the public safety horror genre. And that's coming up next on TiPS Today in Public Safety.
Welcome to TiPS Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories in public safety news. Here's your host, Fletch, with today's tips.
Welcome to TiPS Today in Public Safety. This is Fletch. I'm an NINDA-certified ENP, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I try to bring you the latest, most informative, and sometimes a bit controversial takes on emergency communications. Today we're going to take a look at something that I'm calling the trust gap. And no, this is not a relationship counseling episode for 911 systems, although after some of the designs I've seen, they might be able to use one. The trust gap is actually the distance between what we think we know during an emergency and what we can actually prove. The caller sounds credible, but the call may be a swatting attempt. The network looks great, but calls may be rerouting somewhere else. And you're getting that location on the screen, but it's completely wrong. Data is arriving cleanly and formatted, but it may still be total garbage. And then in the middle of all that sits the ECC, trying to make good decisions while the clock is running and responders are moving. That's a little bit beyond just call handling. That's reality validation. When what's fake sounds totally real. Let's start off with swatting. Swatting's not a prank. It's no longer some bored kid with a headset and bad judgment. Swatting's a deliberate attempt to manufacture an emergency response. The attackers know how public safety works. They know the words that trigger urgency. You know, active shooter, bomb, hostage, weapon, school. They know that 911 dispatchers can't just say, hang on a second, this sounds a little hinky. Let me check the vibes on this. No, public safety's got to take their threats seriously. And that's not a weakness. That's actually the mission. But today, that mission's being exploited. The caller may sound calm. The story may sound specific. The address may be real. And the threat may feel immediate. And with AI voice tools getting better, the voice itself may no longer be the clue that we once thought it was. So the call taker is no longer just answering the phone. They're trying to validate reality and do that in real time. And let's be honest, nobody in the ECC was just sitting around saying, you know what we need? We need more high-stakes ambiguity during shift change. Yet, here we are. When the network seems just fine. Now let's take a look at the other side of the trust gap. Sometimes that caller is actually real, as is the emergency, and the thing betraying you is the network. You see, technology's got that special way of lying very politely. It doesn't burst into the room and say, hey everybody, I'm broken. No, it smiles at you through a green dashboard. Trunks are all up, circuits look clean, and the status page says operational. You check with the provider and they say no known issues. But that phrase needs to come with spooky background music, because sometimes no known issue is just a term for the issue hasn't found the right person yet. Now, from the public's perspective, none of this matters. They don't care whether the problem is in a carrier network, an EZNet, the NGCS, a firewall, a session border controller. A session border controller, some routing table, or a carrier's cloud platform. You know, some mystery box in a rack that's been blinking since 2018. No, they call 911 and they expect help. That's the standard. And that's why verified redundancy matters. Not brochure redundancy, not sales meeting PowerPoint redundancy. No pretty diagrams with arrows and buzzwords. Just tested redundancy. So if your failover plan has never failed over, It's really not a plan. It's what I call theory with confidence issues. When the screen looks official. Now, let's talk about that monitor in front of you, because that monitor can lie too. Not that it's doing it intentionally, of course. That thing only shows people what it's been fed. But that is what the problem is. If the location record is wrong, the screen displays that wrong record beautifully. If the callback number is bad, it's presented to you with total confidence. If the map plots the wrong place, it doesn't look embarrassed. It just sits there looking official because it's done its job. Next Generation 911 is going to bring more data into the emergency communications path than ever before. Better locations, better routing, text, images, video, IoT sensors, and building and alarm data. Maybe if you're lucky, even AI-supported summaries. That's powerful stuff. But more data by itself is not automatically better. More accurate data is better. More validated data is much better. More timely data is even better than that, and more usable data is probably the best you can ever hope for. But more random stuff just dumped into the ECC on top of an emergency isn't modernization. I think it's called digital confetti. And nobody needs digital confetti while they're trying to dispatch police, fire, or EMS. Reality check. Here's the reality check. Public safety cannot operate on blind trust anymore. Not blind trust in the caller, blind trust in the network, not blind trust in the vendor dashboard, and not blind trust in the location record. And definitely not blind trust in the phrase, everything looks good from our side. Now, trust still matters. Emergency communications is built on trust. The public trusts that 911 will always answer. Responders trust that dispatch will send them to the right place. And ECCs trust that the network will deliver the call. But trust without the verification is how we get surprise. And public safety doesn't like surprises. Swatting taught us that a story can sound real and still be false. And outages taught us that a system can look healthy and still be degraded. Bad data teaches us that a screen can look very official and still be completely wrong. And NG911 teaches us that every new capability comes with some new responsibility. Now, that is not an argument against modernization. That's just an argument for adult supervision during the modernization. And yes, I know, adult supervision ruins some of the fun. Trust me, I know that very well. But it does keep your emergency communication system from turning into a very expensive science project, and doing that at the exact moment that someone needs help. The bottom line. Look, the bottom line is that the ECC is operating in a world where reality is getting harder to verify. Yeah, that call may sound real. The threat may sound specific. The network might appear healthy. The location may look 100% correct. And that data may arrive clean, formatted, and wrapped in a nice standards compliant bow. Yet every one of those things can still be wrong. And that is the trust gap. Our job's not to abandon trust. Public safety can't function without trust. Our job is to support trust with verification. Verify the caller, verify the network path, verify the failover, verify the data, verify the vendor claim, and verify the operational procedure. And make sure you verify that before the emergency, because testing after the failure isn't testing anymore. It's just evidence collection. So when someone says, but it sounded real, your answer should be, yeah, that's why we verify. And when someone says, hey, the network seemed just fine, your answer should be, yep, and that's why we test. Because in public safety, trust is important. But verified trust saves lives. That wraps up today's episode of TiPS Today in Public Safety. Thanks so much for listening. For more updates and insights, follow me on social media at Fletch911. And visit 911tips.com for a complete archive of my previous episodes. My blogs are available online at Fletch.TV, and my professional website is at Fletch911.com. Stay safe. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget about our webinar Wednesday coming up at the end of the month. Details at nina.org/events. And if you're in public safety, Thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
You've been listening to TiPS, Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG 911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 90s on 9, the 10 spot, and on the Weekend Countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.